Good day everyone, this is the part 2 of our report. The third reporter will be Ranel Tutu, followed by Lauren Joel Ochavo and Christine Landayan.
So, mayada masalamtan niyo ulan. I am Ranel Aniko Tutu and I was tasked to discuss the three main topics, which are the first, collective struggle and Lumad values; second, heeding lessons of history, the Banwaon of San Luis Agusan del Sur; and lastly, the entry of logging operations. So now let me start my discussion with the first topic, which is the collective struggle and Lumad values. So, militant Lumad political awareness is the hallmark of the Tinduga community. The heightened political consciousness of Dato Andong and his fellow Manobo Pulangion were acquired because of their long and bitter struggle to get back Bagalbal and the rest of Kiyukong from the defunct Rancho Montalban Incorporated, or the RMI. So, the members of the Tindigo community, including women and children, assertively participate in protest actions which surprises politicians, landlords, and the dominant Christian public accustomed to docile and submissive Lumad. So, the Tinduga community believes that their struggle for land is righteous and just, enabling them to confidently present their case to prominent politicians and landlords. Another thing is the Tinduga community places a premium on collective unity, which gives them strength as an organization and enables them to withstand violent attacks. Moreover, the collective work on the land reflects the values of the Manobo Pulangion tribe, and they believe that their recourse to collective unity aligns with their tribal values. So, while other Lumad groups who were able to secure ancestral domain titles were quick to subdivide the land amongst themselves and have this leased for large-scale agricultural plantations, but Dato Agdahan and Tinduga community are heeding the lessons of their long and brutal oppression. Land for them is life, and giving it up for monetary gain will also bring about the extinction of their tribe. So the picture presented right here is Dato Santiago Agdahan, or Dato Andong to his community. He is recognized as a leader of the Manobo Pulangion who have banded together to form Tinduga. He leads the struggle of his community against the violence and impurity of Puling Lorenzo and his armed security guards. Like all Lumad leaders who are fighting for their community's rights to their ancestral land, his life also is in constant danger. While this picture right here is one of the recognized Lumad leaders of Tinduga, paid the ultimate price when he was gunned down by bonnet-wearing assassins on motorcycle on February 3, 2017. That's sad, right? His name is Renato Anglao, 42 years old, and what was with his wife and a 5-year-old child while driving his motorcycle to buy school supplies when the gunmen waylaid him on the Bukidnon Highway. While this picture right here on the morning of March 24 was taken by that date, 2015, while on their way to their farms, Tinduga members were waylaid and ambushed by 30 armed security guards, killing Mabini Tata Beato, and wounded two others. The children of the community refused to forget the incident. That's why you can see in the screen right here that they had a community play because they want to commemorate that day where gunmen tries to kill many Lumad in their community. So to continue the discussion, let us now proceed to the next topic, which is Hiding Lessons of History, the Banwaon of San Luis, Agusan del Sur. So now in this topic, we will be talking about many things, especially the forced evacuation, the military harassment, the human rights violations, the killing of the anti-mining advocate, and desperate conditions, the massive exodus, and many more. So, according here, around 8,000 indigenous Banwaon people, including men, women, children, old, or whatever, evacuated their homes and farms in the hinterlands to seek refuge in an abandoned hospital in the town center. Months of military operations and harassment aimed at flushing out suspected rebel sympathizers were the primary reasons behind the evacuation. A subsequent solidarity mission documented 93 cases of human rights violations, including the indiscriminate firing, restriction of movement, property, distraction, use of public facilities for military purposes, and intimidation for our fellow Lumad. The killing of Nicasio Anges Precioso Sr., the barangay captain of Balit, and an anti-mining advocate, served as the final trigger for the Banwaon's mass evacuation. So we can say that the reason why they evacuated is not just about the military operations and harassment, but also the passing of the barangay captain of Balit, which is an anti-mining advocate. Because imagine that when the barangay captain was killed, they really need something somewhere that they feel safe and not harassed. So that's why after the passing of the barangay captain, they then decided to evacuate to an area where they feel safe and not harassed. So after the killing of the barangay captain of the barangay Balit, they then evacuated and come to a desperate conditions. So during the 2-month evacuation in the abandoned hospital, the Banwaon endured desperate conditions that resulted in the deaths of 3 children and the spread of illness among women, the elderly, and the children, who we can say that the most sensitive part of the community. So after that, they have then a massive exodus. So on January 23, 2015, 174 Banwaon families from 14 sitios across 4 barangays in the municipality of San Luis embarked on a massive exodus to the village center of Balit. But with that, they also received an external support and unity. So the Banwaon received support from the church, not just from the church but also from the civil society organizations and progressive groups, and their display of unity played a crucial role in their plight. So after how many months of enduring all that illness, all that killing, they then return home finally. So after months of encampment and external pressure, the Banwaon were able to return home on March 18, 2015. Following promises from military officials to withdraw from civilian facilities and cease camping near populated areas. So with the that experience, we can say that we can see a political act and organization which is what we call the buckwheat or the massive evacuation, which we can then be interpreted as political act that highlights the Benoitons' political organization, consciousness, collective unity, and the wide external support that they received. The next topic that I will be discussing is the entry of logging operations, and let us see what happened during the entry of logging operations a in an indigenous community, how it affects their lives, and how the um, uh, gradually, you know, how they gradually adapt to the changes that has come into this into the community of the indigenous people. So before anything else, before we discuss the entry of logging operations, let us discuss first the historical background of the Banwaon tribe according to the book written. So the Manawaon tribe is considered a sub-tribe of the larger Higaonon tribe. So meaning it is not really the official tribe, but just a sub-tribe of the Higaonon tribe, that they had their own set of laws and territory recognized by the Higaonon Council of Elders in 1846. So it was recognized by the Higaonon Council Elders that the Banwaon tribe was actually just a sub-tribe of the Higaonon tribe. So before the arrival of Christian settlers and colonial rulers, the Banwaon lived sustainably off the forests and rivers, practicing their own beliefs and laws. While the Banwaon defended their territory against Spanish, American, and Japanese colonial authorities engaging in tribal wars to protect their autonomy. So meaning the Banwaon tribe really insisted to be colonized by these colonizers, especially the Spanish, American, and Japanese. So they were not colonized, not after the entry of logging operations. So logging companies entered the Banwaon territory in 1957, leading to the destruction of their forests, which were vital for their sustenance. So the tribe then, after the entry of the logging companies, the Banwaon tribe has faced a difficulty, especially because the forest was one of their vital for one of their uh, way of living, where they get their food and all. So some Banwaon communities resisted logging operations, of course, because they really resisted the colonizers, how much more the logging operations, which leads to the violent incidents with the military and later paramilitary group. Paramilitary group. So in that case, Banwaon members were killed by armed civilians associated with logging companies. So the Banwaon's opposition to logging and mining operations led to accusations of sympathizing with the NPA, meaning they were accused that they sympathized the NPA, or the New People's Army insurgency. So the militarization of the area forced some community members to work for the logging operations, though they really resisted. But because of what happened, because of the accusations, they were forced to work for the logging operations. So the entry of logging operations brought about changes in the Banwaon's way of life, and that is sad, right? And they learned to adapt the concept of individual land ownership, or the sector, and became integrated into the cash economy. So logging resulted in the depletion of forests, loss of traditional livelihoods, and the concentration of Banwaon Banwaon settlements near political centers for monitoring purposes. So, after how many years of resisting the colonizers, one thing that really disturbed them is the logging operations, the entry of logging operations in their community, and that leads to have for them to have a Banwaan settlements by the barangay officials or the political centers for them to be monitored uh, directly by the government. So by the late 1980s, the logging boom ended. So in 1980s, it then ended. The logging operations ended. So what happened then if the logging operations ended? So it leaves many Banwaon without royalties and wages. So meaning it does not give them any money at all because the logging operations has ended while some members return to their traditional ways of living. So after the logging operations ended, some came back to their way of life way back before. Some are really adapting to the changes. So the corrupting effects of the logging operations had a lasting impacts on the Benuaon tribe. Because imagine that, for how many years of resisting from the colonizers, the only thing that um, entered their community, the indigenous community, is the logging operations, and that really put a lasting impact on the Benuaon tribe. So thank you so much for listening, everyone. That's all for my part. The next floor will be for Miss Lorengel Ochavo.
Hello everyone, I am Lorangel Sinodlaya Chavo, and I will be reporting the corruption of Banuan leaders, the indigenous notions of development, and the hidden lessons maintaining independence. First, I will be discussing about the corruption of Banuan leaders, particularly the betrayal of Mario Napungahan. The 2015 evacuation was not the first time that the Banwaon left their communities because of militarization. They have done this before in 2007 when the communities of Tabon-Tabon, Nakadayas, and Kimambukagyang, also of San Luis, left their communities because of the terror tactics undertaken by Mario Napungahan, a Banwaon Datu who has filed for an ancestral domain claim covering the entire San Luis municipality and beyond. In order to convince his fellow Banuan to support his claim, he has conscripted and armed fellow Banuans, and they saw terror among the local population. According to Bacarisas in 2015, women and children made up the majority of the evacuees, and the community's Banuan Datus were in agreement that a COPD was meant to open the door for big mining firms to enter their ancestral territory. The fact that most of the evacuees were women and children highlights the vulnerability of the Banuan community. Their evacuation implies that outside forces, including the possible intrusion of mining operations on their ancestral lands, have disrupted their way of life and traditional customs. The remarks made by Bacarisas shed important light on the intricate relationships between indigenous land disputes and the effects of industrial expansion on traditional communities. It acts as a reminder of how crucial it is to uphold indigenous rights, protect cultural heritage, and advance sustainable development strategies that put the welfare of indigenous people and the environment first. Mariana Pungahan, reportedly a tribal chieftain, was a former member of the New People's Army or NPA. He was recruited by the Philippine Army as a member of the Civilian Auxiliary Force Geographical Unit or CAFGO. Mario Napungahan, once respected, turned against his tribe by collaborating with the military in pursuing personal gain through land claims. He supported mining and plantation interests, leading to conflict within the community. His betrayal serves as a lesson that money can turn someone respectable into someone unrecognizable. His personal gains weighed more than those of his own tribe, making his tribe vulnerable of any of the bad consequences he caused. His children were schooled under the RGS Tribal Filipino Ministry. His daughters became a midwife and a teacher, but his son, Wilfredon Boy Boy Napungahan, entered the military. These are Mario Napungahan's list of betrayals. First, conniving with the military in their counter-insurgency operations. Second, appropriating the thousands of hectares of the Banoaon's collective ancestral domain. Third, planned entry of mining and plantation interests within the Banoaon ancestral domain. And fourth, led to the founding of the rebel returnees or the Mabantag paramilitary group. The rebel returnees, also known as the Mabantag paramilitary group, are now headed by Narding Pascual and Noel Napungahan, the son of Mario Napungahan. There had been detailed reports of these paramilitary groups' crimes dating back to 2001 that described how they served the same business interests bannered under counterinsurgency. They have burned schools and forced the young Banoaon to be recruited into the CAFGO, according to the UCA in 2002. According to International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, holding the title of a dato or one of the community leaders, Mario Napungahan used his influence and position to form an armed group known to the community as rebel returnees. These armed men function as an informal auxiliary force of the military, joining the state forces in their operations in the communities. In fact, Napungahan's partnership with the military led to the founding of the rebel returnees or the Mabantag paramilitary group that is now headed by Narding Pascual and Noel Napungahan, the son, after his death. In 2007, it was reported that Noel Napungahan threw a grenade at the house of former Balit Barangay Captain Marcelito Precioso. Fortunately, no one was hurt. The recent push to clear San Luis of insurgents, according to the displaced Banwaon, the same motive behind the killing of Balit Barangay Captain Agnes Precioso Sr. is due to the planned entry of the Malampay, Makilala, and Tambuli mining companies into their ancestral domain that is being pushed by the Napungahan paramilitary group in the area. The circumstances surrounding his assassination reveal as much. Balit Barangay Captain Precioso engaged in a contentious dispute with Master Sergeant Andres Villaganas of the Army regarding military presence in their community. Basically, he is opposed to the idea of the military encampment within their community and finds it alarming. However, the following day, Precioso was ambushed and shot by two masked individuals on a motorcycle when he was on his way to the municipal hall to file a formal complaint. This incident sparked an evacuation that endured for several months, and it was said that the altercation was rooted from the long-standing disagreements between Precioso and Napungahan concerning mining activities in the area of Banwaon. After Mario Napungahan's death, Wilfredon Boy Boy Napungahan took over his father's activities and continued to cause problems for the community just like his father did. It is a problem that has been recurring for decades. The motive for the December 2015 Bakwit was that they were forcing the entire community to be part of the CADT that the Napungahans were pushing. And behind the Napungahans' claim, backed up by the military's Oplan Bayanihan and COPDs, are the mining explorations of three companies who want to enter Banwaon territory. These are the Tamboli Mining Corporation, the Makilala Mining Corporation, and the Metro Luxury Mining Corporation to profit from the forests. Now, the objective of business was to excavate and mine from the Banwaon land. This became a huge problem, especially to the Banwaon communities. The rise of the Napungahans led to the weakening of traditional leadership practices among the Banwaons. For instance, a datu is elected as a leader of the community because of certain standards. He must be a role model and holds the interests of the community at heart. Under the dato are the bagani, elite warriors, and the alimaong or troops. There had been instances in the past when tribal wars occurred between rival indigenous tribes who each have their territories within the region. It is the Datu's task to lead the attack or defend the community. The Banwaon are known to be fierce warriors and they have never been beaten in any such tribal war or pangayaw. It is this aspect of the Banwaon culture, also present in other Lumad groups, that the military and extractive interests exploit. They corrupt indigenous leaders such as Napungahan and use them to divide the community. They arm the Datu and his followers in the name of counter-insurgency, and they evolve to become paramilitary groups wreaking havoc in the rural areas. The spate of extrajudicial killings of resisting Banwaon members under the Tagdumahan People's Organization is suspected to have been perpetrated by the Napungahan paramilitary group. The Banwaon community endured this much of a pain caused by Napungahan's betrayal to his tribe. The corrupting effect of military counterinsurgency operations and external business interests to the traditional role of the dato figures greatly into the current situation of the Banwaon. Apart from the mining companies who intend to enter the Banwaon ancestral domain, there are also existing logging concessions within the territory that account for the increasing economic and cultural vulnerability of the Banwaon. There is Wood Domain Incorporated that controls 50,000 hectares, while Jaca controls 5,000 hectares of tree plantations together with 32,070 hectares under Provident Tree Farms Incorporated, all within the domain of the Banwaon. As a consequence, the Banwaon community is now divided into opposing camps. The Napungahan paramilitary group, who push for and protect existing mining and logging interests in the area, and on the other hand, the far larger group of traditional leaders such as the fallen Angis Precioso Sr., who belong to Tagdumahan, a grassroots organization of the Banwaon opposed to the entry of mining and logging into their ancestral domain. Since its establishment, scores of the organization's leaders and members have been killed by the Napungahan paramilitary group, beginning with the killing of Dato Aladino Badbaran in 2009, Genesis Ambason in 2012, Angis Precioso Sr. in 2014, Lito Abion in 2015, Jerry Layola in 2016, and Jimmy Barosa in 2016, according to Tagdumahan. The sacrifices that these gallant defenders of the Banwaon tribe are rooted in their enduring faithfulness to their indigenous beliefs. We are now at my second topic, which is indigenous notions of development. In here, we will be learning about the kind of progress that Banwaons wanted to have, such as the fight for autonomy and the Banwaons' protective nature to their land and their hopes of development and protection to their environment. Without the corrupting influence of business, the Banwaon community believes in the collective ownership of land. That is why they rejected the entry of logging and mining firms under the leader Dato Salingunga at the onset. The problem began when logging was able to enter and more recently when Mario Napungahan represented himself as the tribe's supreme dato, applying for ancestral domain claim. The April law would have provided remedy, but Mario Napungahan and his family used the CADT process, making the Banwaon suspicious of such government-sponsored processes. This is the view that the titling process is something alien and even oppressive to them. Giving individual rights to land would allow non-Banwaons to enter their territory. However, if they don't have a title, government would assume that their ancestral domain is public land. The community frowns upon the practice of having their family plots titled. It is another story if one has it titled because it can then be disposed of. It is their preference to maintain their ways of life, living off what their environment can provide for sustenance. Bay Emil, one of the traditional woman leaders of the Banwaon in Balit, bravely spoke before a gathering to share her experience when she was called to a dialogue with the military commander. The official supposedly dangled the prospect of having a Jollibee in the area once mining development takes place within their ancestral domain. She bravely replied that they do not need such fast food chains like Jollibee if it meant that they would be driven out of their communities. She added that they were happy with their sweet potato as long as they held on to their economic, political, and social way of life. In fact, when someone from the community were to catch a wild animal, it will be cut up in equal portions for the whole community to share. On the other hand, many expressed concern that they would lose all the resources derived from their environment when the mining firms move in and the Napungahans go after their ancestral property. Even though they did not have the trappings of modern life, they said that they never went hungry. Their surroundings did not fail to provide them with their daily sustenance. It was also in their culture to share with the rest of the community whatever they found in the forests. It is observed that even small trees are already being cut down for financial gain, and that the woods would soon be entirely destroyed if foreigners and extractive companies are permitted entry. They believe their Banwaan culture would go as well if the mountains and trees are destroyed. We are now at my last topic, which is heeding lessons, maintaining independence. In here, we will be learning about the lessons learned by the Banwaon community, their belief to their fight for autonomy, and the shared lesson of history to the Banwaon tribe. The painful experiences that the Banwaon learned when their leaders allowed logging to enter their territory are the reason behind their current solid stance against mining, a principle for which many of their members have tragically given their lives at the hands of paramilitary groups. In addition to ruining the land and trees the tribe relied on for sustenance, The introduction of logging also weakened the group's social structure. It is not the desire of the Banwaon to isolate themselves from the outside world, although they value their cultural and economic independence from their historical experience versus the exploitative and violent incursions of external interests. They have experienced living with operating logging companies within their means, and they have not seen development, the kind that benefits all, to have taken place. They are sure that with mining, it will be the same, if not worse. Additionally, they believe that their current fight for autonomy will guarantee the survival of their tribe and the future of their children. This political consciousness is fundamentally a return to historic Banwaon principles, in which the purposes of the community come before individual interests. The significance of the environment is likewise being recognized more and more. Their adamant refusal to succumb to the terror tactics of paramilitary groups who are pushing for mining interests to enter their domain is a manifestation of their belief for autonomy. After a long conversation, there was one thing that Julito Utakan, Secretary General of Tagdumahan, said that struck Arnold Alamon. Utakan shared that the lessons of history for the Banwaon were clear. He said that ang Banwaon man gud naa kanunay pagsabot. Tungod kay nakita man niya nga kami mabuhi bisag wala mo. It is translated in English that the Banwaon have achieved an understanding that we as a people can survive without you. The organized evacuation of 2015 in Balit was a manifestation of this community solidarity.
Good day everyone, I am Christine Landayan. As we all know, the struggle of the Lumad, one of the indigenous group in the Philippines in the face of globalization, is a topic of significant importance. That is why today I am going to talk about accumulation by disposition. What are we waiting for? Let us get started. Before we proceed, let us first define what is accumulation by disposition. What do you think? What does it mean? Well, accumulation by disposition is a term used to describe the act of taking away land, resources, or other valuable things from others, often without proper compensation. This process can lead to significant losses for the displaced individuals or groups who may be left with little to nothing at all. The term has been used to describe historical and contemporary practices of colonization, imperialism, and the displacement of indigenous peoples such as the Lumad. In the case of the indigenous people, accumulation by disposition refers to the process by which their land, resources, and rights are taken away by others, particularly by powerful entities such as corporation or influential individuals. This is often done without fair compensation or respect for their rights. As a result, the Lumad face the loss of their ancestral lands, destruction of their environment, and disruption of their traditional ways of life. This process of disposition leaves the indigenous people, like the Lumad, marginalized, disempowered, and vulnerable to further exploitation. Carl Gaspar, who is a famous writer, respected socio-anthropologist, theologian, interfaith scholar, missionary, artist, and peace advocate from Davao City, highlights important arguments about the marginalized and dispossessed status of the Lumad people in his influential work titled The Lumad Struggle in the Face of Globalization. Gaspar traces their difficulties back to the colonial and neo-colonial periods and argues that unless we challenge deeply ingrained social structures, which refers to the patterns of relationship, institutions, and norms that shape and organize our society, the Lumad people will continue to be powerless. This implies that addressing and transforming the existing systems of power and inequality that contribute to the disadvantaged position of the Lumad community is necessary, because if we don't do it, they would remain marginalized and unable to fully exercise their rights, access resources, and participate in decision-making processes that affect their well-being. He also stated that it does seem inevitable that what began in the post-1946 scenario would continue through the post-1986 period. Despite the promise of people power, the indigenous people remain powerless. The grip of neo-colonialism on the country's mode of production, the political economy, the reins of government, the business conglomerates, the landlord, and on the majority of the Filipino people has become tighter, if anything. This means that he believed that despite hopes for change after key historical events, indigenous communities like the Lumad still face powerlessness. He attributes this ongoing struggle to the extensive influence of neo-colonialism on the Philippines, which refers to a modern form of dominance by powerful nations over less developed countries. Moreover, according to him, neo-colonialism maintains control on our country's economy, politics, and society, which prevent meaningful improvement for marginalized groups such as the indigenous people. Now, let us talk about accumulation by disposition, a theoretical lens for the Lumad experience. As societies strive for modernity, the global economic system designates specific geographic areas as suppliers of raw materials. This arrangement enables the extraction of wealth and abundance from these regions, typically benefiting the West. Unfortunately, this often results in neo-colonial societies experiencing high levels of poverty or extreme inequality, despite any apparent wealth they may possess. Neo-colonial societies refers to countries or regions that have gained political independence from colonial rule but continue to experience various forms of economic, social, and cultural domination by external powers. David Harvey, who is a Marxist geographer, labels this phenomenon of over-accumulated capital seeking cheaper access to resources as the new imperialism. In simple terms, it means that rich countries and companies try to expand their power and control over weaker regions or country by taking advantage of the resources and cheap labor. This process continues the pattern of economic inequality and uneven development, where the goal is to make more profit by constantly growing and finding new opportunities. There are two predicaments inherent to capitalism according to Harvey's analysis. But before that, let's define capitalism. Well, it refers to the economic system characterized by private ownership of resources and means of production, where individuals and businesses operate for profit in a competitive market. The two predicament inherent to capitalism following Rosa Luxemburg states that apart from the problems of underconsumption, which is related to the phenomenon of overproduction, wherein there are more goods produced for existing markets to observe, there is also the problem of overaccumulation, which responds to the lack of opportunities for profitable investment of accumulated capital. In simple terms, David Harvey identifies two inherent problems within capitalism. The first problem is underconsumption, which occurs when there are more goods produced than there are people willing or able to buy them. This happens because there are not enough markets to observe all the product. On the other hand, the second problem is called overaccumulation, which arises when there are not enough opportunities for the accumulated money to be invested profitably. This occurs when there are limited avenues for the money to be used to generate more profit. Harvey also stated that capitalism seeks to generate profit and idle capital incurs opportunity costs if not reinvested. In the face of stagnant demand, capital finds ways to reinvest and make a profit by lowering production costs through the process which we mentioned earlier, or what we called accumulation by disposition. The process of accumulation by disposition is also considered as a contemporary form of primitive accumulation through the ongoing exploitation and disposition of countless untapped resources. According to Harvey, accumulation by disposition releases assets, including labor power, at very low or zero cost, enabling overaccumulated capital to cease and immediately profit from them. In simpler terms, according to Harvey, capitalism aims to make money, and if capital remains in use, it loses potential opportunities for profit. When there is not enough demand for product, capital finds a way to lower production costs and makes a profit. One way it does this is through accumulation by disposition, which means taking advantage of untapped resources and exploiting them for profit. This process allows capital that has already accumulated a lot of money to seize these resources at very low or no cost, enabling it to make immediate profits from them. Karl Marx was the first one to introduce the concept of primitive accumulation, which refers to a historical process where capitalism violently transforms social relations. It was his prediction that capitalism will violently transform social relations from one that is defined As what do you think? Is defined by patronage arrangement related to land to one that is predominantly characterized by an emancipated labor power dependent on wage labor. Moreover, he predicted the proletarianization of peoples all over the world and the conversion of social relation to two distinct types or classes, primarily the capitalists and the working classes. In the process that he labeled as primitive accumulation, which I had already mentioned earlier. This historical upheaval is also characterized by a host of other mechanisms which Harvey, interpreting Marx, identified as the following. In short, these are some of the mechanisms of primitive accumulation. The first one is the privatization of land and forceful expulsion of peasant population. This process involves taking land that was shared or belonged to communities and making it privately owned, often by forcibly removing indigenous people, farmers, and villages from their home. The second one is the conversion of forest property rights into what we call as exclusive property rights. This second process involves changing different types of property rights into exclusive ownership rights, where individuals or corporations have full control and can buy or sell the properties as they please or plan to. Third is the suppression of rights to the commons. This process involves limiting or taking away the rights of communities to use common resources like forests, rivers, or grazing lands, making them off limits or only accessible through payment or other form of barters. Fourth is commodification of labor power and suppression of alternative forms of production and consumption. This process involves treating people's labor as a commodity that can be bought and sold, while suppressing other ways of producing or consuming goods that may challenge the dominance of capitalism, which is sadly very much observed until today. The fifth one is colonial, neo-colonial, and imperial processes of appropriating assets, including natural resources. This process refers to the practices of powerful countries or corporations taking control of resources, such as mineral or oil, in weaker regions through colonization, neo-colonialism, or imperialistic actions. And the last one is what we call monetization of exchange, taxation, especially on land, slave trade, usury, national debt, and the credit system as means of primitive accumulation. Marx's description of primitive accumulation primarily applied to the transition from feudalism to capitalism during the Industrial Revolution. Feudalism was a social and economic system that emerged in medieval Europe and other parts of the world. In feudalism, land was the primary basis of wealth and power, power. It involves a structure with kings granting land to nobles in exchange for loyalty and military service, while peasants work the land in exchange for protection and providing goods to the nobles. On the other hand, like what I said, capitalism is an economic system characterized by private ownership of the means of production and the pursuit of profit. Unlike feudalism, capitalism is not based on a system of land ownership, but rather on the ownership of capital such as money, machinery, and last but not the least, factories. But in the history of capitalist evolution, there had been many twists and turns, and one of these is the continuing preponderance of feudal arrangement in semi-feudal, semi-colonial contexts. The social processes in reality were not as cut and dried as Marx imagined to be, but rather one were a kind of political, economic lag that was integral to the development of the global economic system, which actually occurred. The case of Mindanao and its delayed colonization, as well as the Philippines' role as a producer of raw material for colonial power, exemplify the nuances of this process. This may be the reasons why primitive accumulation, a set of conditions that should have occurred in the transition from feudal to industrial society 400 years ago, is curiously applicable to modern day realities, especially in countries like the Philippines that went through colonialism. As one scholar observed, true primitive accumulation is a process that some have considered a historical phase through which societies pass on the way to more fully proletarianized social structures, which is really based on expanded reproduction. The current state of global affairs makes it evident that primitive accumulation has maintained or even increased its salience, meaning either that it is in fact central to capitalist accumulation in general, or else has a much longer period of historical dissolution than previously imagined. In simpler terms, we can therefore say that the observation by the scholar suggests that primitive accumulation continues to play a significant role in capitalist accumulation today, or has a longer lasting impact than others previously thought, as evident in the current global state affairs of our world today. It is also in the context that the Lumad can be seen as the contemporary victims of capitalist violent onslaught for cheaper raw materials to raise the rate of private accumulation, especially in the periodic capitalist crisis of overproduction and overaccumulation. The drive to conquer new frontiers where the indigenous communities reside has been the resource of transnationals and what we call their local counterparts. In simpler terms, the Lumad people are the victims of capitalism caste for cheaper resources to accumulate wealth. During times of capitalist crisis, corporations targets indigenous communities, leading to agricultural expansion, mining, and the displacement and violence against indigenous people globally. This important political economic angle has not been given emphasis in current discourses regarding the Lumad and indigenous peoples. They have been idealized as repositories of a non-existent and idealized pre-modern cultural truth, when in fact they are the most contemporary showcase of the economic and political violence of global capital made possible through the facilitation of their local agents. In simple words, when discussing the Lumad and indigenous peoples, we often overlook the important economic and political factors. Instead, we try to portray them as preserving an idealized version of an Asian culture, but in reality, they are modern-day victims of the economic and political violence driven by global capitalism with the assistance of local individuals or groups. In the contemporary period, accumulation by dispossession take place in the context of the onslaught of a global neoliberal order pressuring neocolonies to submit to their demand, or in the case of the Philippines, the acquiescence of a pliant political elite that has been ideologically captured by the same forces. The contemporary Philippine state is the nexus of all these forces that make all this happen. In simpler terms, in the present time, accumulation by dispossession happens when powerful global neoliberal forces put pressure on countries like the Philippines to give in to their demands. This is made easier by a cooperative group of politicians or corporations who have been influenced by the same forces. The Philippine government plays a key role in this situation as it becomes the meeting point where all these different forces come together, which can really be seen in our current societies and is really a sad reality and issue that we Filipinos are facing today. David Harvey writes that the primary vehicle for accumulation by dispossession therefore has been the forcing open of markets throughout the world by institutional pressure exercised through the IMF and WTO, backed by the power of the United States and to a lesser extent Europe, to deny access to its own vast market to those countries that refuse to dismantle their protections. In simpler words, according to David Harvey, accumulation by dispossession primarily happens when markets are first fully open up worldwide. This is done through pressure from organizations like the IMF and WTO, supported by powerful countries like the United States and Europe. These countries use their influence to deny access to their own big markets for countries that refuse to remove their protective measures. In conclusion, accumulation by dispossession affects the Lumad people in profound ways. They are subjected to economic and political violence as global forces, backed by powerful countries and local partners, pressure them to give up their resources and land. This process is facilitated by the cooperation of local elites, leading leading to the dispossession of the Lumad and the perpetuation of their marginalization. That is why it is necessary to recognize and address the injustices faced by the indigenous people like the Lumad. It is also necessary because this topic reminds us that to prevent this, the Indigenous People Rights Act of 1997 or IPRA, officially designated as Republic Act number 8371 in the Philippine law, is essential as it recognizes and promotes the rights, resources, and lands of indigenous cultural communities and protect the indigenous people in the Philippines. Moreover, it is important to remember that citizens and the government must continue to challenge the systems and forces that perpetuate accumulation by dispossession, and we should always advocate for a more equitable and inclusive society that respects the right and dignity of indigenous communities like the Lumad. That's all, and thank you so much for listening.